I'd like to call to order the Finance Committee of November 28, 2023. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. Do I have a motion for approval of the draft minutes of the November 14th, 2023 Finance Committee meeting?
I move approval.
All right, we have a motion for approval made by Alder Gerhardt. Is there discussion or any corrections? Hearing none, place the motion before us to a vote. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Moving on to the next item, item 3, public appearances, non-agenda items. I don't believe we have anyone registered for this portion. Correct, Scott? Correct, sir. All right. Thank you. And then the next item, item 4, the Finance Director report, the Treasurer's report as of September 30th, 2023, and I'll turn the floor over to our Finance Director, Misty Dodge.
Thank you. So to start, the September Treasurer's Report is included in the packet. There's not too much going on in September. It's mostly just monthly interest and quarterly interest that we received. So I'll pause in case there's questions before I move on. No? Excellent. Other things going on in the Finance Department. The county opened their tax roll software to me this afternoon. So we're at the point now where we're submitting our data to the county, balancing, reconciling, and getting the tax bills started to be generated. We are still looking at a mailing date of between December 12th and the 15th, which is our pretty traditional timeline for when those get mailed. We also have our audit preliminary field work is next week, Tuesday. Randy, you're on deck to have a conversation with them. It's just a one-day field work for this part where they really look at what our processes are, our controls, that type of a thing. And then they come back out for the full audit in March. And then one other piece of good news. So we have, in the last few years, we've implemented what's called positive pay for our bank account, which means when we issue a check, the bank verifies that the dollar amount is what we said it was going to be before they actually authorize it to be cleared. And if it's different, there's an exception process that staff can go in and say, yes, this is real, or no, this is fraud. The bank has now implemented what's called positive payee pay. So it's just an enhanced fraud protection. So it looks at not just the dollar amount, but also who the check was made out to. So it's an extra way for us to make sure that when we do cut checks, that it's only the people we cut them to that's cashing them, and it's for the right dollar amount. So just a small behind the scenes things, trying to make sure the city's finances are protected. That is it.
Very good. All right. Thank you. Moving on to item 5, review of bills. 5A, detailed review of checks for $10,000 and above for the period of October 1st to the 16th, 2023, totaling $4,920,253.45. Questions or discussion from the committee? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 5B, detailed review of all checks issued. Checks 125921 through 125997 for the period of November 1st through the 15th, 2023, totaling $5,048,221.81. Questions, discussion from the committee? Hearing none. Moving on to the next item, 5C, detailed review of P-card transactions for $10,000 and above for the cycle ending October 6, 2023. Total dollar, $331,722.56. Questions, discussion from the committee? Hearing none, moving on to item 5D, review of P-card transactions for the cycle ending October 6, 2023. Total dollar, $474,359.51. Questions or discussion from the committee? Hearing none. Moving on to our next action item, which is item 6, 6A. Do I have a motion to move Resolution R-204-23, amending the 2023 Library Fund Budget, utility costs?
I move approval.
All right. Motion for approval made by Alder Wheeler. Who is speaking?
I'll take this one.
All right, Misty.
So the library has been monitoring their budget for 2023, and because the chiller has been struggling, that's why we are paying to get a new chiller in the building, hopefully in the near future. Also, the solar has been non-operational for much of the year, which we'll talk about a little bit more later on in the agenda. The utility costs for the library are expected to go over budget. And so to absorb that, they're proposing to use the interest revenue, because the market has been so high, to use that kind of one-time extra revenue to pay for this somewhat one-time extra expense. Obviously, we have to continue to heat the building, but the hope is once the new chiller is in 2024, that our costs will go back to somewhat normal. So 2/3 vote is going to end up being required at council, but it's a relatively housekeeping item.
Very good. Questions or discussion? All right. Hearing none, I'll place the motion before us to a vote. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Motion carries. On to our next action item, 6B. Do I have a motion to move Resolution R-205-23, approving agreement with Bauer Builders, Inc. for the City Hall front desk remodel?
I move approval.
All right. Motion for approval made by Alder Gerhardt.
I'm going to actually start this one, so we're having some technology issues. So Tim is available for questions. We might just have to chat back and forth to get his words through me to all of you, but I figured I'd kick off his items. So this one is the remodel of the front counter. If you remember earlier in the year, we had bid this project out and it came in very high. So you rejected those bids and then we've rebid it. We did get 2 bidders this time, one of which was lower than the estimate and is keeping the project within budget. So we'd like to move forward with that project. I believe it's from February to July is the time frame of which they are allowed to choose when the project would occur. But once they start, it's like a 4 to 6 week project.
Very good. Questions, discussion? Alder Gerhardt.
I guess just logistically, do we have a plan for, as we're reconstructing the front desk, how do people interact with City Hall staff?
So I don't know the exact answer to that, but I can say Tracy Oldenburg, the city clerk, has been involved in the conversations. So I'm going to guess that that's covered, unless Chad has more to add.
And it's
I
not
have a
going
whole
to.
house full.
It's not going to overlap any of our. Is there any way for us to make sure it doesn't overlap any of the busy periods, or maybe that doesn't really happen in the February to July?
So that's kind of why that time frame was picked.
Yeah.
So February is after tax collection, and July is before we're hopeful the presidential primary stuff kind of
Okay.
starts. So there will be some overlap. We might have other elections in February and April, but hopefully just not as busy as those other ones.
Great, thanks.
We do have an election in April, though. I mean,
Yeah.
okay. All right. Any additional questions? Discussion? Hearing none, place the motion before us to a vote. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Motion carries. Moving on to the next action item, which is 6C. Motion to move Resolution R-206-23, purchase of interview room recording equipment.
I move approval.
All right. Motion for approval made by Alder Wheeler. Mr. Hartwig, Lieutenant, soon to be Captain, you have the floor.
Thank you. We have 4 interview rooms that are covered by our existing city camera system. Approximately 2 years ago, we started experiencing some technical difficulties with them and have tried to work with the vendor and have identified the best course of action is to actually replace those cameras with cameras that are part of our squad camera video system. So they work within the same ecosystem, and these cameras are going to give us better audio coverage, which is important. We're required by state law to record most of our interviews, and then we're also recording interviews with victims as well, that we want to have the highest quality audio. And so this plan here will install these cameras that work within our system and also work within the existing system. The next question that comes up is they will be transferable to a new facility. So this will give us a couple years of better audio and video quality and will be transferable.
Very good. Questions, discussion from the committee? No, hearing none. Place the motion before us then to a vote. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you. All right, moving on to the next action item. My bearings here, 6D. Do I have a motion to move Resolution R-208-23, creating and updating the water disconnection policy?
I move approval.
All right, we have a motion by Alder Gerhardt for approval, and I will turn this over to Robert. Go ahead, Robert.
Hello. In March of 2020, the PSC put an order in place to not allow disconnections for non-payment. That was for COVID. It resumed later on on April 15th, 2021. So over that year of not disconnecting for non-payments, we did not see an increase of past due balances from our utility customers. After that, we decided, with the growth of the city of Fitchburg, with all our development and acquiring the town of Madison residents, we wanted to look into our disconnection policy to make sure we were using our utility guys to their best ability. And what we found out through this is that there are other municipalities around us that do not disconnect for non-payments. Examples are Middleton, Verona, and the city of Madison. And so the current and updated water disconnection policy in front of you establishes in compliance with the guidelines set by the PSC of Wisconsin, and this policy also outlines the conditions under which water disconnections can occur, and it relates procedures to late notices that go out quarterly, the tax certification process that allows us to put balances on the tax bill, and then also penalties.
Very good, very good. Thank you. Questions, discussion? All right, hearing none from the committee, I'll place the motion before us to a vote. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Next action item 6E. Do I have a motion to move resolution R-209-23 approving North Fish Hatchery Road Hub Phase 1 at 2220 Traceway Drive, design concept amendments? All right. Motion for approval made by Alder Wheeler. And Scott, you're addressing this? I can. Okay, the floor is yours. Thank you. And we do have a gentleman, Mike
Zelke from Enberg is here. He's our architect if there's questions.
Very good.
But as we rebooted the hub project, and as you recall, phase 1 of the hub was approved except the covered structure over the hard court. But as we rebooted the project, the idea of potentially including the covered hard court was going to be reconsidered. So what we did have, Enberg and Mike put together some amendments to the current contract that we have for the project. Amendment number 2 is basically due to the delay of the project, there's some additional engineering costs along with some inflationary costs associated with the construction of the building, or of the project, if you would. And then they also provided another amendment, Amendment 3, and this was to design and potentially construct the pillars that would be needed in order to support the covered hard court. And then we do have Amendment number 4, which includes the foundation, the pillars, along with the construction of the covered structure for the hard court. I will, if I might, Amendment number 3, the cost for design and construction administration is $55,000 from Enberg. Amendment number 4, the design and construction is $110,000. But that would not be added to the 50 if the council would decide to do 2 and 4. The amendment would be Amendment 2 for $64,000, along with a total cost of $110,000 for Amendment 4. So they don't fit for Amendment 3. If you do decide to do Amendment 3 and Amendment 4, it isn't $55,000 plus $110,000. It would just be the $110,000.
Very good. Thank you. Questions from the committee? Just one question, Misty. Where are we at with the? Obviously, we have adequate funding for this project, but where does that leave the rest of the balance of parks?
Yeah, so included in the resolution, there is a budget amendment. So what's in the resolution right now is that Amendment 2 and 3, which has additional costs. So that's reflected in the budget amendment. as well as when the last time we came through with the final design, we thought the Traceway North project was going to occur, which has obviously been delayed. So we had to shift some funding sources there. So those two pieces are both included in the budget amendment, which is in the packet. There is enough funding available to cover those costs. It does potentially delay projects that are identified in the CIP if we had no more park fee collections happen between now and when those projects come up. But would be surprised if that happens, if there isn't something that would allow those projects to move forward. But at least the current year anticipated projects are all able to be fully funded.
Okay, very good. Any other questions? Alder Gerhart.
For just history purposes, can we talk a little bit about why the project? Because originally we were planning to start construction this year. Is that correct? Can you talk a little bit about what caused the delay?
Well, there was some delays in the easement on the parcel that we did receive, so that there was some items and issues that needed to be resolved before we could get a clean parcel, if you would. So that was the reason for the delay.
And that has been corrected?
That's been corrected, yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions? Hearing none, I'll place the motion before us to a vote. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it, motion carries. Thank you, Scott. All right. Moving on to the next item, item 6F. Do I have a motion to move Resolution R-210-23, amending the 2023 debt and capital projects fund budgets, unspent capital funds, unused budget interest payment, and redirection of debt proceeds?
I move approval.
All right, motion for approval made by Alder Gerhart, and I know Misty's going to speak to this.
Yeah, so there is a staff memo included in the packet, but ultimately there are three different projects that I'd like to move some funding around. The impetus for this is mostly because in 2023, I chose not to borrow money in 2023 because the projects have been delayed. Once I borrow the money, there's a clock for how fast I have to spend it, and didn't feel like those projects were going to meet that clock if I borrowed in 2023. So I'm delaying all of that borrowing to 2024, which will probably happen in the beginning of 2024. So you'll see that process starting in the next couple of months. But when I look at 2023, we did budget for an interest payment to be made on that debt, which now obviously doesn't have to be made since I didn't borrow the money. So I would like to repurpose that money that we budgeted to actually buy down how much we have to borrow for those projects in next year. Also, as we were going through the 2020 debt proceeds, there was some additional borrowed money that I needed to find a new home for within certain confines. So that is being proposed in here as well. And then the bigger one is when we closed out the fire station projects for the two new fire stations. There were two funding sources that were not utilized for that construction, and I'd like to move those funding sources to also buy down the amount that I need to borrow for 2024. Those two funding sources were the sale of the old fire station and then some fund balance that we had used to pay for the project. Because of how all the costs and how the other funding sources worked out, I didn't have to tap into those funds at all. So I'd like to put them to good use by not borrowing as much in 2024, which will then reduce the amount that the city has to spend on interest as well as the issuance cost. So this resolution just shifts funding sources around. It does not change how much is allowed to be spent on the projects. It just changes how those projects are funded.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. You make it sound simple, but I'm glad you're speaking to it. Questions from the committee? Alder Gerhart.
I appreciate the detailed memo. I thought it laid it out really clearly, and it sounds like a great strategy. And nice to know that we don't have to have that interest payment. We can reallocate those funds, those budgeted funds elsewhere. And so you said in the first quarter of 2024 is when we anticipate taking out debt. Mm-hmm. And does that include the debt for the police station, or would that be the following year?
So it'll include likely the bulk of the police station borrowing, because I want to match up when we start spending money to when I borrow it. But I may delay some of it to 2025. I'll have conversations with the financial advisors and then also the project staff to try to match that as much as possible.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, additional questions? All right, hearing none, I'll place the motion before us to a vote. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it, motion carries. Moving on to action item 6G, and I know staff has a recommendation or a suggestion on how we should move with this resolution. Misty?
Yes. So this is a direct referral. There is a financial implication, which is why it's on your agenda. However, because there's a closed session at council tonight, staff would recommend that you send this to council without a recommendation from finance committee so that everyone can hear the information from the closed session at the same time and you can make a more informed decision.
Okay. Do I need to vote on that to?
So someone still has to make that motion to send it to council without a recommendation from
Right.
finance committee.
All right. Do I have a motion to send on to council?
I move that it be sent to council
Council
without a recommendation.
All right, very good. All right, then we'll vote. Any further discussion? I don't believe that would be part of it. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Motion carries. Moving on to the next action item, action item 6H. Do I have a motion to move resolution R-219-23 authorizing payment to Madison Gas and Electric for relocation of electric facilities for the Fish Hatchery Road reconstruction project? And this is a direct referral.
I move approval.
Motion for approval made by Alder Gerhardt. Misty, you're speaking to this item?
Yep, and again, Tim's here if there's more questions. But when the Fish Hatchery Road reconstruction project occurred, there was a MG&E electric facility that needed to be relocated, and then some electric connections that were needed for some of the infrastructure. That was about a $90,000 bill. However, the bill was not paid. So what this resolution is doing is it authorizes staff to make that payment. I'll say the cost of that is within TID 10, and there is funding available to make that payment. So it's kind of a cleanup item.
Very good. Discussion. All right. I'll place the motion before us to a vote. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Moving on to action item 6I. Do I have a motion to move resolution R-221-23, amending the 2023 ARPA fund budget? And this is the urban tree inventory, and this is a direct referral.
I move approval.
All right. Alder Wheeler is motion for approval. Scott, you're going to speak to this item?
Please, yep.
Okay, go ahead.
And this is, it's going to allow the forestry division to work towards a forestry management plan for the city. And basically, in order to put that plan together, you're going to need to know, the types of trees, the number of trees, all of that kind of data. And then this work will be tree inventory update in order to get that data collected so that a forestry management plan can be developed from that information. Now with this, we did receive 3 bids for this work. The lowest bid was from Waco for $3.25 per entry, if you would, and with the dollars that we have allocated, we can inventory about 7,692 trees. So that'll be a nice start to the collection of the data so that we can begin to work on a forestry management plan. And this will be a two-third vote too.
And what's the scope of the project in that? Is it strictly parks, city government, the entire city? I mean, as far as the ultimate objective, I guess.
It's trees within the street right away between the sidewalk and the curb, basically to inventory all those trees, all the locations that potentially could have a tree, but it'll just provide the base data that can be utilized to create a strategy, a forestry management plan to be organized and those kinds of things. So,
and I noticed that you want to put you have a vendor, but is there a reason it couldn't wait another 4 weeks? I know you're securing 2024 dollars and 2023 dollars. That's the reason it's before us now.
well, and we'd like to get going as quickly as we could. We did get the bids, and they just like to get started on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Any other questions? Alder Gerhardt.
I was just happy to see this come through. I know we've been talking about this for a while. Has there already been conversations about, it sounds like there's already been conversations about putting it on our GIS, our public map, when we have that information?
Yep, that's part of the whole, I guess, maybe not the management plan, but providing the information and the data for the community. So we're really trying to create that information so that residents can, like you say, click onto a tree and find out what it is and all of those kinds of things. So
And we know that the Watchel would put the information in the format that we can easily upload
yes,
it into the
it's
GIS.
an existing system that we do have. So they collect the data and put it into the existing inventory program that we have.
And then 7,692 trees, do we anticipate that would be most of the trees within the city right-of-ways, or is that only a portion of them?
Boy, that would probably, to be safe, is probably just a portion, but it's a good share of them.
And then we might have to look at next year about allocating some additional funds to finish out the inventory, because it seems like it would be a shame to do partial.
That's
not
good.
finish it up.
Well, that's a good thought. We'll kind of see where we're at the end of the day, and then see what we need to do.
Okay.
Thanks, Gabriel.
All right. Any other questions? Hearing none, I'll place the motion before us to a vote. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you, Scott. All right, moving on to the next action item, which is 6J. Do I have a motion to move Resolution R-224-23, acceptance of the COPS grant? And this is a direct referral.
I move approval.
All right, motion for approval made by Alder Gerhart, and Deputy is Matt Leahy. No, excuse me, Leahy. One of these days I'll get it correct. I apologize.
I'm sure you will.
Yeah, we'll keep working on it. The floor is yours.
So, as many of you are aware, on November 2nd, we were awarded through the U.S. Department of Justice COPS office a grant for a total of $625,000 to assist in funding the hire of 5 new police officers over the course of a 3-year period. This referral is simply to ask the governing body of Fitchburg to accept that $625,000, not to spend it immediately. There are conditions and extensions that are allowed within the grant to extend the project period, as well as to modify the acceptance of the total amount if, for financial reasons, the city cannot hold up its end of the bargain. So, because this was awarded on the 2nd, we have 45 days for the city to accept the grant, and it has to be in its total for the grant to be accepted. Any questions?
Yeah. Alder Gerhart.
Yeah, I'm curious about, from a financial perspective, because when I was reading through the memo, it said that potentially we would hire on an officer in September, or multiple officers in September of next year, and it would cost somewhere around $100,000 in the 2024 budget. And to my knowledge, we don't have any room in the 2024 budget. So from a financial perspective, how is that going to function?
Do you want to take it?
You go ahead with that
So staff's proposal is that we accept the grant tonight because there is the time frame, and then included in the resolution is council directing staff to include the cost of these officers in the referendum or funding source conversation. So if this is approved, I think staff's direction is that at the very least we'll go to referendum for these 5 officers. We're not proposing to, and we don't have authority to under this resolution, to actually hire those officers. That conversation wouldn't occur with the council until August. And at that point, we would bring a separate resolution that would have a budget amendment associated with it, and then authority to actually hire them. So for 2025, in theory, that would be covered by the referendum. The 2024 cost would be, 4 months, not a full year. And then the portion, just the local match, is the piece that we would have to come up with. There's a couple of options because it is, it's not a one-time thing, but it's kind of a pseudo one-time thing that's addressed the following year. We could do a couple of different things, including the $115,000 that you guys put in that undesignated contingency through the 2024 budget. That might be a good use of that money when the time comes. So right now, we're just approving actually acceptance of the grants. The hiring of the officers and the plan for how to financially afford those would come to you guys in August.
So we're confident that we're not going to face a structural deficit if we accept this, assuming that we have passed the referendum. And I guess you said that there's mechanisms for us to back out.
Correct.
If we end up in a situation where we just can't feasibly do it because of the realities of levy limits. Is that?
Based on this resolution, yes.
Okay.
So there's no actual authority to hire anybody at this point. So this resolution would not have any financial implication or a structural deficit. Come August, staff will
figure
make sure
that out.
that that's addressed.
Okay. Great. And then want to thank the department for putting in this grant in and congratulate you on getting it. It sounds like it's a difficult grant to
Very
to get.
competitive. Yep.
Yeah, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree. Very pleased that this came before us. And I'm assuming this grant was written from your department?
Yeah, it was a collective team effort, and we got a lot of support from community organizations and some elected officials. So
Good, very good. And yes, any other? Go ahead.
I do have one more. So in terms of the staffing plan, I know you talked about the need for a lieutenant. That was one of the first requests for staffing.
Correct.
Before additional officers. So this sounds like these are 5
these would be
officers.
specific for 5 new police officer hires, and these officers will be neighborhood officers. That's part of there's the financial picture or project, and then there's the programming aspect of the purpose for the application. And we'll have to, if we do end up getting these 5 officers, once these officers are hired and trained, then there will be 5 new neighborhood officer positions created, which will also have to report to the COPS office during this grant period.
So do you have a vision about where, do you have specific neighborhoods that you're thinking
Yeah,
about?
they'll most likely line up with our Healthy Neighborhoods initiative throughout the city.
Great, thanks.
And you do reference it as COPS.
Yeah, it's
I mean, the acronym, or I spelled it out, so I just want to make certain what I'm speaking to, that's all.
Yep.
All right. Very good. Is there any other questions, discussion? Hearing none, I'll place the motion before us to a vote. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it, motion carries. Thank you, Deputy Chief Lay. Do appreciate your time. All right, moving on. I believe that's the last action item. Moving on to item 7, announcements. Our next Finance Committee meeting is scheduled for December 12th, 2023. Next action, adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move adjournment.
All right, motion for adjournment has been made. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Motion carries. We are adjourned at 6:35 p.m. Thank you.